On this episode, I sit down with Erin Sarofsky, founder and creative director of Sarofsky. Erin's studio is internationally recognized for its design work in creating main title sequences for blockbuster movies and television series. Erin's career highlights include being featured in Art of the Title.
Everybody knows.
Erin was also interviewed on CBS Sunday Morning, scooped up an Emmy nomination and a Cannes Lion. Ladies and gentlemen, please welcome my guest and friend, Erin Sarofsky.
Conversations with Bryan Grant.
Erin, thank you so much for joining me today. It's just an honor and a privilege. And I must say to everyone who's watching, I just recently moved to Chicago, as you know. Mm-hmm. And Erin was so generous and so kind with your time. I mean, really. You welcomed me into the studio and met your team. And so you're just a little love.
Oh, thank you. That means a lot. I just, I think a lot about community and how you treat someone is how you treat everyone kind of thinking.
Yeah, like I didn't feel, and it's really interesting too, I didn't feel like being in your studio in the West Loop of Chicago, there was no sense of like ego. It was just like this really like wonderful, clean vibe,
That makes me really happy. I don't know, sometimes I think we forget like the things we make and how important to our community and like just the world as it is. So we're also not on the coast. We don't have that. I don't know. We're Midwestern to a certain degree. I mean, I'm from New York. I mean, everybody's kind of from somewhere, but
that's part of why I moved here.
Yeah.
But
nice
okay,
place.
So I want to start from the beginning. Erin, you grew up in Levittown, New York.
Yep. Attended
Island Trees High School.
Yeah.
What was it like growing up in Levittown?
I mean, so Levittown is like the first planned subdivision. It's a pretty famous kind of place. Like people came back from World War II and they started buying homes out on Long Island, and it was like a classic Levitt house that I grew up in. So 3-bedroom, 2-bathroom, kind of simple house, really kind of quaint. Very Stranger Things. That's what it was. We all knew the ice cream man's name. Like you came home when the street lights turned on, you saw your teachers out in the world, like at the grocery store. You snuck out, you snuck back in, it was all the things, kind of magical. The first time I drove was like the ice cream truck. I was like, can I drive it? And he's like, sure.
Definitely a simpler time, like you
it's
said.
Just different. It's just different than it is now. I have a 7-year-old daughter, and I think about like, oh my God, in first grade, I would walk home from school. It was just under a mile. There's just no way. Yeah.
Would you, and I know like you moved out of there, but how old were you when you left? Were you old enough ever to like go into like the city? Like, was that a cool thing, or were you already gone?
So I grew up in the same house my whole childhood. So like born in that Levitt house and went to school from that home. And my parents didn't move or change homes until after that. But my dad worked in the city. He worked on Wall Street. And so we were in the city at least a couple of times a year, just because of him, going to visit him at work. And when I was in high school, I took summer classes at Parsons, so the new school. And then I also took kind of classes on the weekend at St. John's, which wasn't downtown or anything like that, but it was Queens, I think. Yeah. So I was out and about, living and doing a bunch of things. I wasn't one of those families where, you live on Long Island, but you've never been to New York. Like we would go in and do Rockefeller Plaza and do all the things, like see the Rockettes, see the tree.
Absolutely. It's interesting you said Parsons School of Design, because I know Justin Cohn also went there in our industry. And so you went on to get a BFA in graphic design and then an MFA in computer graphics from Rochester Institute of Technology.
Correct. Yeah.
Now, I've read in an interview that and we'll get to it because, boy, you've done a lot. You're
Yeah.
just so cool. Because you're so humble. That's the coolness about you. But is it true that when you were like a little kid, and we're going to get into space in a minute because I think
Okay.
that's a theme in your life, right?
Maybe. Yeah.
Maybe. You didn't always want to be a creative person or have a creative field. Is that true?
Yeah. I mean, I love science. I love math. I was, super into building things, but I also could draw and was very creative and very just good with my hands. Like when my brother got to do the Pinewood Derby, for Boy Scouts, I was super jealous of that. So and why I landed at RIT was because I didn't want to go to just art school, air quotes, just art school. So not that there's anything wrong with that. I just didn't want to not have the option to like go into something with physics or space or something like that. So it took me a minute to kind of like lean all into art and design. Yeah.
Were your parents supportive of that? Because I know that's a tough thing with some creative folks because it's not safe, it's
Yeah.
artsy.
I don't know. I think, towards the end there, like we were a very middle class family, but my father was doing well by the time I left. And I think they just figured like, whatever, we can support her forever. I also think like, there's an aspect to being a woman that even my parents thought like I would eventually get married and be taken care of and be a wife and a mother. And that was never on my radar. So I don't know where they got that from, but like society, I think they were more thoughtful about, my brother and put more stress on him to do what, to be more of an earner. So for me, they were like, oh, I guess we'll support her until she can find a husband to support her.
And that's certainly like generationally,
Yeah.
I think speaks to that for sure. So you also went to space camp.
Love space camp. Went twice.
Okay. So I want to get into that, but because that sounds so cool. But you have your daughter's Rocket.
Yeah, my daughter's Rocket.
You have dogs Luna and
Yeah.
Mooney.
And Mooney.
I see a pattern forming.
Yeah. One of my cats is Aster, which is star or flower, but star, and then Sally Ride, obviously, first lady in space. So
Tell me about space camp.
I mean, it's just a completely magical thing. I still have like the jumpsuit. It's one of, that's around when the movie was popular. Remember it was just after. So I don't know. It was just like a cool thing. I was just like a very adventurous kid. I mean, I did, summer teen travel camp over summer. We were just like my family like really made it so that we could do things. We were a family of doers. We weren't like sitting around on the weekends. We were going somewhere, exploring something, visiting something. Like I have all these like vivid memories of like going to a battleship one weekend or going to Williamsburg or doing like, like that recreation village. Like we just were a family of doers. So when I was like, hey, I want to go to space camp, they were like, okay, go to space camp.
That's amazing to have that kind of support from family, right? Because not everyone has that. That's amazing.
No, it surprises me even now to see how like sedentary some people's lives are by choice. You know what I mean? Like I like getting out there and being in the mix and doing things and being part of the community. And
absolutely. And it's interesting too, because do you think that like little Erin, in your fascination specifically with space and the unknown and all the things that go with that, was that like the first sign of maybe that like entrepreneurial spirit and a lot of things you're doing now, maybe?
I don't know. Like I think I was babysitting and like working probably since I was like 11 or 12 years old. I was always like earning some kind of hustle. So I think that's like, I think some people just have that. Some people just don't, and I've definitely had that my whole life. Yeah.
Yeah, I agree with you. I'm in a similar boat where grew up absolutely like middle class family, but I think it's in your DNA to have that charge to do,
Yeah.
whatever that is.
Yeah.
At 12 years old, I remember getting an early bar mitzvah
Mm-hmm.
gift, an 8mm Sony 3 CCD video camera, and
Okay.
starting stop frame animation.
Yep.
And then that went on to bar mitzvahs and weddings and all of that. But
Yeah.
I think that like you're born with that. Are you finding that with your daughter? Does she have that spirit?
So my daughter's interesting. She's on the spectrum. So her language has been coming very just delayed, and just like how she sees the world is so magical and different. And so it's taken me a little bit of time to just like adapt to the idea of just somebody growing in an atypical way, out of balance. And it's really like when she says something in a new way or describes something, it's in no way how I've ever heard anybody describe something. It's totally based on her unique vantage point on how she sees and hears and feels the world. And I've really like very much grown to love that aspect of her, even though it provides challenges, you know what I mean, especially around communication. But I think it's really special. So I do think she is going to be, she loves stories and movies and film and TV, and she has really good taste, actually, less the Paw Patrol. So I think she has like a really good eye, and I think she understands narrative very, very well. And she is constantly like kind of creating and writing stories. So I think, and she really loves when I redesign a space and do something. She's like very hyper aware of where things are and has opinions about them. So maybe she'll be like an interior designer or something. Because I do see, I'll go like thrifting with her or to antique stores, and the thing that she wants to get is always like, oh my God, you're like such an interesting little person. She's just like a really interesting little person.
What a beautiful thing to observe and like a different point of view,
Mm-hmm.
right? Especially as a mom and as a creative leader.
Yeah.
Right.
Yeah. Well, I think, when you're a creative director, you provide direction. You don't pick up the tool and do it for them, And so how you provide direction really depends on the person, and maybe sometimes the results you get is not what you would have done, and maybe not like kind of how you were inching them towards, but you're like, wow, that's even better, or just as insightful, or like I wouldn't have come to that solution. So you got to create space for that when you're nurturing a person, whether it's a child, or you got to leave space for them to find themselves in it.
Was that something that you knew or had to learn, the sense of giving that artist space as you just described?
A little bit learn. I think, as you go from being like the maker, like hands in and stepping away, like the natural tendency is like, let me do that for you. Like it's hard to teach a kid to tie their shoes and then like sit patiently and wait to get out the door for like 18.
Right.
I mean, and it's like that with work too. You have clients waiting. You're just like, oh, I could just get it there so much faster. I have better skills. I have better intuition, like all that stuff. So, but after like many years of experience, you realize like actually like tying the shoe for them like ain't helping them, and it ain't helping you either. So
correct.
You just, some people just also aren't suited to be creative directors. They're suited to be like senior talent in what they do. And I think people always think creative director, I want to do that because that's like the thing to be. There's just like push towards like the next ladder or the next rung, and that is the thing. But some people just aren't like born for that or made for that. So
isn't that interesting though? You bring up a really great point. So cut to a freelancer in a shop, designer, animator, motion graphics designer. And you're right. I feel like if there were to be like a ladder, outside of becoming a senior level person, then sure, like creative director and on and so forth. But you're right. It's a totally different skill set.
Totally different. Yeah. I've tried to kind of like force that because even like me, like when you see somebody, they're just such a great senior designer, you want to like push them, you want them to grow, and like you have this idea of what growth means and they have this idea of what growth means, and then you realize like, oh wow, you're pushing them to be something like that they're not. Maybe wow, they're not comfortable in front of a client, they don't find the words easily like they do leading like a team of artists, and you're like, oh actually they can't write and you need to be a writer to be a creative director, and oh god, like yeah, they can teach somebody how to build a comp, but they can't necessarily give great creative feedback, and you're just like, oh okay, yeah, it's kind of interesting. It's very, very different skill set. Very different skill set.
Talk about, for the people who are listening now who might not know the intricacies, when you talk about being a creative director and needing to know how to write.
Oh God.
Talk about that.
Being a writer is like one of the most important things. Like when you send off work and you want to put a little note in there with it. Also, most of your clients are more geared toward the written word than the visual. Like you can send a frame and there's likely they're going to read the thing and then understand the frame. So if you can't articulate it in writing, where you're going with it, what's working, what's not working, I think that's just like the most important thing you can be. There was a point in my career after I started the studio where I was like, I'm a terrible writer. I need to fix this. Like I went and took classes at Second City to become a better writer. And what was great about doing it at Second City is it like helped me keep my humor and my voice and all that stuff.
Absolutely. And when you're in front of a client, there is a little bit of a performance, right?
Yeah. Well, yes. But it's
not like that, but you know what I mean.
Yeah, like you got to read the room, man.
Right.
If they're not liking it, nothing you're going to say is going to make them like it. So just saying like, I can sense that you're not vibing with this. Let's break it apart, see what's working, see what's not working. Now that's a different entry than let me tell you why this is the fucking Mona Lisa. You know what I mean? When somebody's not liking it or not reading it. Yeah. So reading the room, filling a lot of dead space too with just general conversation, human to human, growing relationships and friendships. Most of my closest friends are now clients, and they're people that you went to like kind of war with, every project. So.
Don't you feel like, even though you described what you did with Second City, don't you feel like in a way like you're either born with that or you're not?
Yeah, I mean, to a degree.
That high emotional intelligence,
Yeah, but you could definitely get more dialed in. You could. Yeah. Like if you're doing improv with somebody, even if you're not good at improv, like you're reading cues and you're learning not to shut people down, but to open them up. You know what I mean? There are definitely techniques, very simple techniques you can learn to keep the conversation going and keeping it light and keeping it easy, making it easy on your clients. Yeah.
What was like one of the biggest like aha moments that you said that you had learned?
So for me, it was like a combination of like my Second City stuff and talking like I speak and doing all that. And then I had an assistant who's an amazing writer, Hallie, but very technical writer. So I would do all this writing and then she would go in and edit it. And she would take all the personality out of it. And so what happened is we would like sit down and we would get into it. I'll be like, that doesn't sound like me. Like she's like, yeah, but you can't have, 13 ellipses in a row. Like that's not, it might be how you're reading it. So we kind of came to this middle ground where it was still technically well written, but also sounded like me. And that took years, like a couple of years of her and I going back and forth where she learned a little bit more about me and my style of writing and my style of communication. And she was like a very heavy technical person, and I think that's been the most special thing.
If ChatGPT were around then, would you be using it some for the writing part of it and the things you're talking about?
Yeah. And I use it a lot now for sure. because
It's
what it does,
amazing.
yeah, I mean, it essentially does what Hallie does, where I say, I don't have to go through that fine editing on myself. I can use that. I could like write up a paragraph. I could just bang it out. I don't have to worry about like somebody being like, what the fuck? And I'll even say to ChatGPT, I'm like, this is like super disjointed. It should probably be broken down into this, and this in paragraphs. But here's like a stream of consciousness flow. Can you help me like make this make sense? And then you give it feedback. You say, that's good, but you're focused too much on this and not on that, or you misunderstood what I was saying like this. And then slowly it starts to become this thing. And it's using you. I'm like, use more of my words. Don't like, you know what I mean? So fascinating. Like it's really been a great tool for me. It just helps me get further faster. I just don't have time to be, laboring over words in a treatment like the way I used to be able to. It just helps me get faster. Yeah.
When you started at Digital Kitchen
Hmm.
in 2001, what was your role? Were you a designer? Were you animating when you first started?
Yeah, I was what I would call a junior designer. It was like my first job in motion design post college, and I was designing and animating. Though I was definitely a much stronger designer than animator, and I would sell boards. Like it clicked in after a little while, and I just became like a pretty. I could win, you know.
I feel like, yeah, I mean, Digital Kitchen, what an amazing company. And I even remember when I was in college and around that time I'd graduated and left for Los Angeles, but Digital Kitchen was like the
Yeah.
most amazing place in the world, like
What year did you graduate? Yeah.
2000.
Okay, so same. Yeah. Yeah,
Oh, no
that's
way.
right.
Okay, right
That's when
on.
I got my master's finished. Yeah, I was in 2000. So
Yeah, that place was amazing. So you must have learned from amazing people there because I know you were then promoted and
yeah, I mean, like Digital Kitchen was an interesting place. We can get into that if you want. I think,
yeah.
my lens at the time is different than my lens now as a business owner and like all the things, because I was just a kid out of school, working with like these incredible other kids. Like we were all so young. But the two people I would say I most really looked up to there were actually in the Seattle office, and I was in the Chicago office. It was Mason Nickel and Danny Young. They were like, they would do things and it would just like, I was like, I got to beat them. Like they're the best. I got to beat them. I got to pick their brains as little but as much as possible. And especially in the early days, DK really treated the whole company as like one thing. So when there was a job that came in and the pitch team would come from two offices and you'd sit around and do crits like normal before things got presented to clients. So, like every job I was on, like Danny Young got to give me feedback on, you know. So he was really super, and his work was just
Yeah, I know.
like touched by the angels. Yeah.
What was the difference of, I mean, as a young kid working there, you mentioned now as like a business owner and like so much later,
Yeah.
it was probably a challenging place perhaps when you first started. Is that a fair?
Yeah. So for me, I, if it was challenging, I didn't realize it. I just was so happy to be there and to be working. And I worked so hard, and I worked because I love to work. And if I was on something and something else came in and I wanted to do that, I would just work more. I wouldn't say, can I be off of that so I can work on this? I also wouldn't even ask to be on it. I would just put myself on it. Like, I would just be like, I'll do boards for this too. You know what I mean? Like, so it was a bit of like I would never say no when I was put on something, but I would definitely like show interest in something and also like put myself on it. And
So,
yeah.
so what was the moment then, Erin, when, because in 2009 you launched your own company, but just
Yeah.
prior to that, while still working at Digital Kitchen, was there just a moment where you're like, I got to open my shop?
No. So after it became like pretty clear, I didn't see like anything super senior happening for me at Digital Kitchen. Um, I wanted to leave. So I
Do
was
you
like,
think it's
okay.
possible though? Like if you were going for that promotion and you did get that senior level job, do you think maybe there would be no
I think,
Sarofsky?
oh, without question, I was so into being at DK. I would have grown the shit out of that company. And I wonder, if it would be a different thing than it is now if I were
Oh, you
involved
bet
in.
your ass it would be, but okay.
I
We both
wonder.
know that.
Yeah,
No,
I
yeah.
mean, but here's the thing, like, imagine essentially like you hire this kid out of college. And I struggle with that too. Like they've been working for your company multiple years, like they're doing a lot, but like you kind of remember people where you meet them, you know? So for the owners and for all those people, like I was still like this kid that didn't know anything,
Isn't
but
that
was like
interesting? You're
running
right. Yeah.
things. Yeah. I also say like to like push it way into the future. Even for my studio, like if I were to ask all of my clients, like, what do we do? Like, how would you describe what we do? It would be what, like, it would be when they started working with us, like what they hired us for. Like it would be kinetic type for some people and live action for some people and heavy visual
Okay.
effects for some people. Yeah.
Okay. So, as a studio owner
Yeah.
and a variety of people listening, how do you break that?
Well, you meet more people. You don't
Right.
break it. You don't break it. It's really, really hard. Even with like super close friends that are clients. And I'm like, hey, that thing you're doing with so and so, like we could do that too. It's like, yeah, but that's like what they do. It's like, no, that's what I do too. It's hard for people to see you differently. It's very, very, very hard.
Have you ever pitched that client who, let's just say hypothetically, knows you for really amazing 3D? Okay.
Okay.
Would you ever pitch that same client for, like, let's just say a kinetic 2D project ever to
So I
kind of
think
try and break that?
I think it would go backwards like that. But I think because I feel like for some people, animation is animation, right? Like, so I think a lot of people don't see clients would see a lot of distinction between 2D and 3D animation, even though it's like very different.
And wait a minute, that's so smart because that's so true. And I don't want to like just grace over that because people like you and I and a lot of people listening, of course there's a distinction. Some people are specialists in one or the other.
Oh.
But you're absolutely right. Clients don't care. And right, go ahead.
Well, there are distinctions, but I think like a distinction would be character animation versus like typography and heavy design. I think
Right.
sometimes people will be like, oh, that's two different lanes where, you know, like you could cross the streams there much more easily than people would think. But in general, like people think of animation as animation. They're not thinking about like how you get to that result. So
But you're saying like the opposite. So like I'd ask, like, would you pitch a different style? And you said the reverse happened?
So like if we do a lot of 2D stuff with somebody, like, or when I say 2D, I mean like typography, like designy, VFXy, like kinetic
Right.
type, just like super designy shit. Like
Right.
maybe think about it as motion branding. And then all of a sudden they're coming to you with, or you see they have some boards that are like character animation. You would say like, hey, we do that too. We do character animation. They're like, really? Like, I don't see much of that on your site. I was like, yeah, well, like that's not what we're like 100% known for, but like we definitely do that. Um, and you could send them a couple things, but like when you go to Buck's site, like that's what they fucking do. You know what I mean? Like if anything, they have trouble selling the other direction. So I think, when you get into that like character space, it's a little bit different than technical tool space. I think animation is
Mhm.
kind of animation. Yeah.
What was the biggest challenge when you first started your company? You're brand new. It's 2009. It's just
Yeah.
you at the
It's
time?
just me.
Go on.
Yeah. I had a salesperson, Tracy Bernard, that was getting us some work and a Easy Mac end tag. I don't know. Those were the days, man. It was so simple. Like, Fuck.
Bring them back. I know what you
yeah,
mean.
I mean, like I have insurance policies now that I didn't even know existed then, let alone had them.
Right.
I didn't know about.
Right.
I'm not even gonna get into it because it's
Right.
like people don't want to hear that shit. But like, I think like the like depth of naivety was super helpful. So knowing all
Oh,
the things,
yeah.
yeah, it's like, and I like really enjoyed growing the team, and everybody was freelance, and it just was like a lot simpler. It's like people expected like a lot less of me as an owner. It was also a different time. People expect a lot more of an owner of a small business than they did back then. Like, a lot of times I feel like I work for everybody. When back then everybody worked for me. Everybody worked for the client. Now I feel like I work so that everybody can have a job.
Correct.
Yeah, it's just a different vibe. It's just
Correct.
like entitlement has flopped, and I'm pretty sure I'll
So
get wallop for that. But I so what was the challenges? I think every day it was just a different challenge. Like, when I wanted to hire my first employee, it was like, oh well, we got to figure out how that works. Like, how do I pay somebody? How do I do healthcare? How do I so it was like,
how did you pay for that first employee?
we signed up for Paychex. I went to school in Rochester, and Paychex was like a local Rochester company. Also, this was before all the online platforms like Gusto and Rippling and all the things. So there weren't like easy tools. So you hired a payroll company and they ran payroll for you.
I meant, right, totally understood that.
Oh.
I guess I meant, no, I mean, thank you for that, of course. That's
So
a perfect
technical.
Erin answer. No, I love it. No, but I mean, like, it's a universal fear, I think, amongst owners, founders, et cetera, of like being able to afford a
Oh,
full-time employee outside of yourself.
yeah. I mean, once the work starts coming in,
Right.
so I always had the thought like, they will come, I will build it. So I wasn't one of these people. I didn't have like a pile of money somewhere. This was like, there was some money. Okay. Like, there's some consistency to the work. It seemed like the work I was doing out of Detroit for General Motors, there was a cadence to it. And for McCann, there was a cadence to it. So I was like, well, even if it's slow between now and then, it's still like decent enough money where I feel like the flow will be there. And again, I didn't go from like 1 to 10. I went from 1 to 2, and it was an assistant. And then, I was like, okay, let's add like a technical creative kind of person to the mix, and let's add an executive producer. And it just kind of very slowly grew one piece at a time. Yeah.
When you started, were you actually, and I mean like the very, very beginning,
Yeah.
were you the one, at least for the first project, second, et cetera, literally doing the work?
Years.
Okay, exactly. So here's my question for you,
Yeah.
because I think a lot of people can relate to this. When there is that threshold of, I'm Erin, the animator, designer, the creative,
Mm-hmm.
and I have the shop. And as you know now, you have to like delegate and hire people.
Yeah.
When you hire other people, they'll probably have a similar, I think, maybe style. I mean, of course, it all depends.
Yeah.
I mean, everyone's
I get it.
different. But did you have this moment of like, I have to kind of give up my style or give up a sense of me because it's no longer Erin, it's now the company?
I think what people don't realize is staffing is not staffing, it's curation.
Talk about it.
So curation is like if you were collecting art for your museum, like there's all different kinds of museums with all different kind of art. It's all fucking art. You know what I mean? Like when you are staffing creative talent, you're curating creative talent. So when I bring people in, I'm curating them based on the work they've done in the past. And if I resonate with that, if I see myself in that, if my other creative directors now see themselves in that, if they see our clients work in that, and then once they're in, like the first year or two is seeing if we can, if their natural sensibilities like align with like what we want to be doing, right? And if it doesn't, that's okay. It doesn't mean that they're not a great person. It just might not be the right fit. It might be like, hey, like their work is amazing, but they want to go more this direction, and our studio is going more that direction. So time to go. part ways. So the act of staffing and creating and hiring talent, especially full-time talent, is really about curating talent.
So then you never, okay, so Erin, so then you never had that moment where you were clenching on to, I'm being hired because of the style of work,
Mm-mm.
and then
And
you have to relinquish that control.
no, I love that. I love bringing in other people and getting their perspectives, and very open to giving people freedom,
I love that and happen to agree. You'd be surprised how many people don't.
Well, also my studio is a generalist studio. I want to be the pentagram of motion design. I think we are the pentagram of motion design, and so um, that means I staff with that in mind. You know what I mean? And I think that that means like we're not going to bring a lot of illustrator animator in. That's just like not our style. So that's obviously not why then somebody would think of us for that. So there's curation to it. There is like, and
But a curation, though, in a certain style, though.
yeah, yeah, but I don't look for a book that looked exactly like my book or looks exactly necessarily like the studio's book, but like shows range and shows excellence in typography, and doesn't necessarily have all the razzle dazzle animation, but has like nice buttery, just really understands cadence and energy. Yeah.
So let's talk about why the world and why I feel you're a genius.
Okay, I'll let me. Okay, you're recording this. Great.
That's the Bryan, make sure it's on.
Make sure you're recording this. Yeah, let's get to it.
Well, I mean, that is one of the reasons why when I moved back to Chicago, you were one of the first calls because,
Awesome.
all the way from Los Angeles, I think like a lot of people look up to you. I mean, listen, the quality of work and all your accolades, which we'll get to in a moment. But okay, so my question is, I got to, not as personal as you have, but I got to work with the Russo brothers, but through a shop.
Okay.
You work with, and everybody who's listening, Erin worked with the Russo brothers, which this team of directors, go look them up if you've been living under a rock for forever. Yeah. Erin, how did you originally meet them and then start working with them? This is so fascinating and amazing. And I'm so proud of you as like a human being. That's fucking awesome.
Thank you. Well, they're great, right? Like, they're good people. They're really great collaborators. They really love design and want design integrated into their work. And they think about it in script phase now. So it's good to be brought in so early into projects.
A lot of people don't know that's extremely rare and sometimes never done.
Yeah. So like typically a main title or VFX, like a special sequence or something in a piece is like, oh yeah, we got to do that. Like we're in post, they see a need for it, and it's like, okay, let's play around with that. But it's usually like as last minute as they can make it. Sometimes aggressively last minute, sometimes like as soon as people start post is real. Ideally, as soon as somebody starts post is when they should start thinking about main title.
At like the least, but yes, you are correct.
Yeah,
Folks would be amazed how last minute these things usually
Here's the thing.
are.
Live action is so important. Your story, your narrative, all of that stuff. It's still, so I do think like once you are moving into edit, once you're starting to see a first draft of something, like you should be talking about main title because you've shifted from like what you practically have to get out in the world into, okay, like how can we do this thing and make it all kind of come together? But
let's circle back.
Okay,
Russo. Very humble. Russo, how did you meet him?
So it was early on with the studio, probably that first year. I got a call from one of their producers on Community. It was, they were having a problem with their existing main title in that they just weren't sure if they liked it anymore. Maybe they jumped to a solution too quickly. They weren't sure if it was right. And they were wondering the producer was wondering if I'd come in the next day and meet with them. And so he sent me all the materials and everything. It was kind of a really fun, kind of crazy story.
Did they know of you before that, or
So yeah, so Jake, the producer, who I'm still friends with, he's amazing. He's still with Agbo and the brothers. So if that puts anything into context for you, he's awesome, Jake Oz. And he he asked around. He asked a lot of producers, "Hey, who do you got? Who's great at main titles?" And honestly, he doesn't remember, and I have no idea how he got my name. So he must have just called he's like, I literally called everybody. He was, I think, pretty new to it also. So we're like all kind
Amazing.
of swimming through the ocean together for the first time. Anyway, so yeah, so it was the day before. He asked if I could come to the set of Community to talk to the studio, to talk at Sony, to talk to everybody. And I was like, yeah, sure. And he sent me some scripts or whatever. And so, of course, I read them. And it was like 2 hours before. And he called to ask if I had any AV needs for my presentation. And I, of course, started cracking up because I was like, no, this is like a download. What do you mean a
Yeah,
presentation?
exactly.
It's
I'm
been a
not
day.
presenting. Yeah, yeah,
And he's
yeah.
like,
Oh,
okay.
typical producers. Yeah, yeah, yeah.
No, he
Okay.
was, like, what did he know?
Of
So,
course. Of
so
course.
I'm like, he's like, okay, I'm sure this is going to go well. I'll see you in a couple hours. So I was like, oh shit, I better like come up with some ideas for what this main title could be to just like create some thought starters. So it was at Pizza Mozza, which has a great bar. Got some pizza, had some wine, um, and made a list of all the ideas that this main title could be. And I went in thinking I was just like so unprepared, super gonna embarrass myself, And they pushed all the tables together on the library set. And so I was sitting like in the middle, and then all around the table were the writers, the producers, the brothers, like everybody was
Were you
there.
freaking out
I didn't,
a
no,
little?
no, I wasn't. Cause like, I mean, they hadn't kicked me out. I've always had this vibe though, like if I've been invited to the table, I'm allowed to talk. I'm supposed to talk,
That doesn't mean though that you still can't be like
I know.
internally a little nervous. But
I
anyway,
wasn't
go on.
freaking out. I mean,
Go
like the
on.
Russos had just finished Arrested Development. Nobody cared about Arrested Development back then. I mean, people care about it now. And not, I don't even know if I had seen Arrested Development at that point. I mean, I definitely saw Welcome to Collinwood that they did. And I read the scripts to the show and they were very funny. Um, but so, I don't know. I just wasn't nervous. I was just, it was a pretty cool thing to be on it still at that point to be on a set. And I was like, this is awesome. So I sat down and I was more maybe nervous that I was unprepared, felt like I was unprepared because, as, coming from Digital Kitchen and, we show up with boards, like we show up with a deck with stylized, beautiful photoreal frames showing them what their main title is going to look like. And here I am. I had like a little notebook and I'm like, okay, here are some ideas. And let me tell you, it was like the most amazing moment of my career because I'm sitting around this table and I lobbed the first idea, which I remember super vividly. I don't remember the whole list, but I remember the first idea as being like the idea of rejection letters falling. So you're rejected from Princeton, you're rejected from this place, you're
Right.
rejected from DeVry, and then finally you get into like, community college. And they were laughing. That's like really funny. And, one writer says something and another writer says something. And it's like kind of growing. And then another writer chimes in and said, well, but even though everybody's like rejects, they're all kind of rejects, this is where they go for acceptance. And so that it was just like, it stopped being amazing at that point. And I was like, oh. And I went through the list and eventually we got to like the cootie catcher idea, which eventually, which they went with and they got like right from the jump. They were like, oh, that's amazing. They loved it. So, after that like conversation, we agreed that I would go and make some boards and send them over. I basically made a cootie catcher and then just took pictures of it and put it in a deck. And they were like, yeah, we want this, make that. So I was like, okay, they didn't care if it was shot, if it was CG. They were just like, go make it, go do your main title thing. See you when you have something.
That must have been a really great plane ride home.
Yeah. So the thing about it was that it taught me is design. Oh my God, design doesn't really matter.
Go on.
Okay. So we show up with all these beautiful boards, and we've taken it so far, so far, so fast. But like, we didn't take a moment to make sure we got over the first hurdle, which is like fulfilling the brief. You know what I mean? Making sure it was the essence of the characters or the thing they needed for their show, the thing that they were missing that they could use every week, like creating a sense of place or something like that. We get so wrapped up in how beautiful things are and how pretty things are. Like, we miss sometimes just answering the question, solving the actual problem to be solved. And that taught me really everything. And we still think about that, and we still kind of adjust how we do things internally every once in a while based on that. Because sometimes going too far, like if you show beautiful photoreal frames and you're type, like, it's taken so preciously. It's very hard for somebody to pick apart a beautiful design where an idea they can just say like, oh yeah, it could be a cootie catcher, but like, oh, it shouldn't have colorful illustrations. It should just be like a big pen, and it should probably be smeared because like that's all they'd have, right? And like, it's like 13th grade, so maybe there should be like, boobs or something in it. You know what I mean? Like, you can have those conversations, but if I show up with like, this cootie catcher and it's all illustrated out and it's colorful and it's all this other stuff, they could be like, oh, that's not quite right. That doesn't fit our show, because some choices were made maybe before it was even ready to have those choices made, And a lot of times they might not see the difference between like B- level work and A+ level work. I think that's like our job, So that's, I think, mostly what we're hired for. Once like the concept comes to fruition, it's working for them, and it's creating a really great brand for what their show is about, both from like a narrative perspective and a branded logo moment perspective, billboard. Yeah, like, it's just interesting. Like, design doesn't matter until later, is maybe what I should say. Until later. Concept is king. Concept, solving what needs to be solved, really understanding even what you're solving, is really important.
It's solving the client's problem. And I know we both know Joe Pilger, and he talks about just that, where it's not just the assignment, it's solving problems.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. And a lot of that is just listening, So.
And you got to go on to work with the brothers with a lot of those amazing Marvel titles.
Yeah. So after Community, there were a couple of pilots that they worked on. And then we were working on a main title for, it was a sitcom that didn't last very long called Animal Practice. And I saw in Variety, bam, like, the Russo brothers are going to direct Captain America 2 Winter Soldier. And I would just like literally opened up my email and was like, hey guys, I am so happy for you, but I am more happy for me. I have always wanted to direct a superhero main title. Don't forget about your girl when it's time. That was it. And they were like, of course, it wasn't so simple because like Marvel had to get on board with it. But like, yeah, that's just like how I roll. I'm like, whoa.
That's what I love about you.
I still have that email. I'm so happy for you, but I am more happy for me.
What was that like? Did you have to like champion extra, or you just sat back and let them say, listen, she's the one?
So we would have to have been like approved through security. Like, Marvel isn't Marvel, Apple, all like the big things,
Correct.
It's not, when you see something like that on somebody's reel, just know that it's like infrastructure, like security, infrastructure. There's so much more that goes into that. It's also like a visual effects pipeline that you're in. You can't just like render Rec 709 at 4K. Like, that's like not how that stuff works. Like, and they need to be confident that you're not some like rinky-dink motion design company. And so really what people like Marvel need is visual effects companies. And so there is a very big difference in pipeline between visual effects companies and motion design companies. So when the Russos are like, oh, we know this company in Chicago, it's great, like great creative thinking, they're like, yeah, that's not what our worries are. Like, can they actually execute this work? And it was stereoscopic, and it was like all this stuff, you know. And you could tell we were like the sixth bidder. They had everybody in for this pitch, you know. But at that point, I kind of knew what the Russos liked. I knew what I liked. And when you work with people for this long, and you kind of get into a rhythm, um, and so we got the download for the film. We got to see the film. You fly out, you'd see the film, then you come back and you get to work, and then you would pitch in person. So this was like, let me set the table for you. So this definitely made me nervous. So it's the Russos, who are at this point like friends, hello, hugs, all the things, chit chatty. And it's Kevin Feige, Lou, and Victoria, and there's a screening room.
That's a fucking room.
Yeah, and you're in a beautiful screening room, like on Marvel Studios, and you have all the effects producers up like in the balcony, kind of queuing things up, running the presentation, which you send like a day before, and you kind of go through it with them so that they can make sure everything is working great for the directors and the producers and everything. And you sit, and I started with the board that was like the board. It was the board I collaborated on with David Mack. He did all the illustrations, and then I did all the design. And we just did this super aggressively minimal palette, red, black, white. And, I could see, Joe, I think at some point, elbowed Kevin and said, you see what, you know what I mean? And through the presentation, we kept going back to that board. And I was like, oh, that's the board. But I didn't feel like I had the job, because having the job I knew was more than doing something amazing creative. It required a giant leap of faith on their part to hire an unknown company without any proven skills to be able to do this work.
Absolutely.
Totally insane. I don't know if I would have done if I were them. That's a really big risk,
Yeah, it's a huge risk.
Yeah, I'm like almost holding my breath right now thinking about it. But
yeah, exactly.
And so like we did the thing. I just wanted to make the brothers proud and show work that they could feel like, yeah, like even though it didn't work out, like she showed amazing work, and that it was a good presentation. So we left the presentation and got on a plane. And when we landed, we had a voicemail to call them, and we had the job. And that security would be arriving first thing Monday morning, to review the office and to go over all the stuff we needed to build infrastructure wise that I knew we didn't have, so.
And that's a really good point, because a lot of people, I guess, just who haven't worked on these projects, from a freelance point of view, if you're on one of these projects, I worked with Logan way back in the day on Apple. And when you go into these places, folks, they're siphoned off, there's security, there's curtains, there's it's wild. So did you have to,
yes.
There's certificates and you had to build. Probably was not cheap.
Modify. What was so crazy. Yeah. So I had, at that point, it was like a couple months prior, I finished my build out of my new space. We were over in a rental a few blocks away, and we were starting to outgrow it, and I just wasn't sure. And I shopped around looking for another rental space for a while, and I just couldn't believe how expensive things were once you got into a more legit space. And of course, just starting a company, incredibly naively, I was like, oh, I could buy a building and do a renovation for that much. So I did that. And we had just moved in not even a month before. And our other space wouldn't have been a viable space. I don't think. I think they would have come out and been like, absolutely not. You are not doing this here. So we had our own space. It was just us in the space. So it was a very minimal changes in terms of on-site. I think the bigger changes were with firewalls and things like that. Yeah. So long ago, 2012, 13, something like that. So
it's incredible.
Yeah. Crazy, right? Totally crazy. So Then we hired somebody that was super amazing with stereoscopic pipeline, and they helped us build our pipeline. And that's when we integrated. I wasn't sure. I don't. It might have been Nuke, but it was either Nuke or the Flame came into play at that point. Um, yeah, and so like Rinky Dink, After Effects, Cinema, occasionally Maya. Like we grew up fast overnight, you know. So
When you got your first interview call out feature in Art of the Title,
yeah,
was that a huge deal? And by the way, we'll get into it, folks, but like Erin's got like probably a dozen on there now. But what was the very first one? Were you like, oh my God? Because that's pretty cool.
I don't
Do you remember back then?
know. I don't remember. And, you know, I was probably called out a little bit before because I was doing main titles at Digital
Right,
Kitchen.
right, right.
So, um, the coolest thing about Art of the Title is that they interviewed Pablo Ferreira or Ferrero. I always mess up his name. Somebody everybody's gonna make, but he's like an icon. And they asked him, you know, what his favorite main title like that year or in recent memory was, and he called out Winter Soldier. And I about fell out of my chair because I felt like, okay, that's I'm gonna be chasing this carrot of doing better than Winter Soldier my whole life, and it does feel a little bit like that. But you know, it was a beautiful piece. Yeah.
So your father, Simon,
Yeah.
who would take you fishing and horseback riding,
Yeah, of course. Yeah.
seems like a beautiful guy. I lost my dad last year,
Okay.
and I know, sadly, you lost Simon.
Mm.
What do you miss most about him?
You know, it's been so long. He died in 2004, so I was still at Digital Kitchen. Um, you know, even as long as he's been gone, I still kind of think about him like he's here. You know, instead of making the call, you just kind of do it in your head. I do wish he could have seen all of it, you know. But I do see it in different ways. Like he was like a very enigmatic person. He was the life of the party. He was very loud and boisterous. And I will get messages on LinkedIn still from people that he worked with just saying, you know, I've been watching you your whole career. You don't know, but oh my God, your dad would be so proud of you. So I get like and then, you know, I'll be like, let's get on the phone. Tell me more, you know, because when you lose somebody in your early 20s, you don't really know them as an adult, you know? So it's just kind of interesting. I don't feel like I was ever like mature or adult enough to know like him as an adult either. You know, it's just so through that specific perspective. But I wish he could have seen the company with his name.
He does.
Well, maybe. I don't like really believe I believe in like ghosts and shit like that. I like fully believe in things being haunted, but I think you leave behind what you put into the world and how you move through the world and all of that stuff. So when there are random people reaching out saying like, oh, you don't know this, but me and your dad worked together and he was so pivotal in my career and I just wanted to say hi to you. And that's what's left. You know, I think that's legacy. That's all that stuff, you know?
It's total legacy and almost like a little visit.
Yeah.
Isn't it?
Totally.
Like I've experienced that. Too.
Yeah.
Like, tell me, like you drop everything.
Yeah.
Right. And like
yeah.
you're just like in the moment. You're
Yeah.
like, tell me more.
Yeah. Like what about like this thing you saw that made you reach out for the first time in like 30 years? Like where did that come from, you know?
Right.
So like what made you think of him in that moment to think about me or, you know?
Well, do you think that, Erin, do you think that like consciously or subconsciously, outside of the way that you were born in your DNA of just this powerful go-getter, and that's oversimplifying it.
Yeah.
Do you think that like making dad proud is still somewhere in there that you just want to keep topping yourself or keep going, even if it's like subconscious in a way?
I mean, maybe, you know, I, I was always just like really super self motivated, you know. I think my dad would have been proud no matter what I did, you know. Yeah, I think both my parents would have been. But um, for my mom, like money was very much a driver of like how she, and she's still around, but like how she sees people's success, and
Mm.
really takes a lot through that. But for my dad, like he just touched people differently than that, and it, you know,
Well,
so
so do you, you know.
yeah. Well, thank you. Yeah,
I mean, really,
I do my best. I
that's
mean, it's
how I
really hard. Yeah,
that's how I
to
started this interview. I
yeah,
mean, without even knowing all this. So, yeah.
yeah, yeah. It's hard to be in a position of just like as a creative director, as a business owner, you're in a position of like being a conduit in so many different directions, right? Like you have artists and talent and freelancers and all these people that you're employing and you want to make them happy, and you have clients and people whose careers are on the line every time they call you now, and then you want to make them happy, and you want to see as much of the budget on screen for the client, and you want to do work that everybody's proud of, so but then you also need to run a healthy company, and you can't spend all the money all the time on the things that you want to spend the money on. And I feel like the thing that people don't realize about small business owners especially is that there isn't an infinite amount of everything all the time. There are just always decisions that have to be made that requires constant compromise in one direction or another. And it's not about giving this person more or this person less, or like it's just like constant compromise. I think about, leadership and like in politics and like governors and mayors and, like the compromises that constantly have to be made just to inch things forward and make things better. And it's just not an infinite amount of resources in every direction to make everything super easy. It's really stressful. Yeah.
You and I share one of our favorite childhood shows, Fraggle Rock.
Oh yeah, I love Fraggle Rock.
I know you do. I did my research. And do you think though that amazing show? Do you think that loving that show as a kid somehow, some way influenced you into now what is the Meet the Scrimps?
Meet the Scrimps. I mean, definitely. I think, a lot of people like Muppets. For me, it was definitely the Fraggles over like all the rest of the Jim Henson universe. And I just remember that song down at Fraggle Rock,
Of course.
Yeah. Um, for sure. I think we live in this like weird intersection of like art, technology, culture, and like when AI started to have that thing where everybody could put a picture of themselves in and they could turn themselves into like a wizard or a rock star. I mean, everybody's feeds blew up with that. I was just like, oh my God. Again, it's that like Second City, that humor that like, I'm also a fiber artist. I do a lot of and collect, and like I kind of like a weirdo like that. And I was like, I wonder if I could turn myself into a Muppet. Like, how far can the? Because it's one thing to do like a photoreal, like take this picture and put it on like Keith Richards' body. You know what I mean?
It's
like
different.
I was just like what can this AI really do? So me and Austin Shaw started playing around, in Discord with Midjourney, and he sees me in there. He's like, "What are you doing?" I'm like, "I'm trying to turn myself into a Muppet," and then he starts to like play with it, and then it's like a little. It was, first of all, so fun to be.
Can you
like,
explain, by the way, what that is, what you're doing with Meet the Scrimps? Because it's quite a thing.
Yeah, Meet the Scrimps is a series of just like felted portraits that Austin and I create in AI. So you start with like an image of somebody, and then you kind of craft the prompts to like kind of nudge it in a certain direction. It is not to make a Muppet, though. At first, it was like, can I turn myself into a Muppet? Then it got like, it took like a weird kind of little bit of a dark turn in that, like, the idea is ultimately like scrimp is like scraps. So if you think of like the detritus left from real Muppets, stuff left on the floor and discarded, that kind of put together to make like an impish character that's mischievous. So these things aren't supposed to, they're supposed to like look like the person, but they're not supposed to be perfect. And they're not supposed to be kind in how they're supposed to have like a little edge to them and, you know, be a little bit off color. And so the writing is a little bit like that. And I created this Instagram where they all live, and, you know, it kind of blew up pretty quickly. Like I did one of Andy Cohen and he just like retweeted it. So that like grew us from like a couple hundred followers, which is basically like our friends, to like a couple thousand followers. And then we started creating some more and tagging some people. And then it started turning into more and tagging more people. And it's now like 27,000 followers. And we're creating a pipeline to do them animated with VO and all that stuff. So hopefully I can start doing like a short, like little sketches. It started just like from joy. And then it is fun at the end of the day to scrimp somebody, turn them into whether it's a friend or a celebrity.
I don't want to put you on the spot, but maybe the thumbnail for this interview, maybe you can answer later, but oh my God, if I became a scrimp, I would go nuts. But
yeah, I would be happy to scrimp you.
Real quick, I know you have to go. Can we do the famous speed round?
Yeah.
Okay. This is real quick and then we'll go because I know, and thank you.
It's okay.
Very much appreciate it. Okay, here we go. Ladies and gentlemen, here we go. Speed round. What is your favorite beverage?
Arnold Palmer.
Your favorite sandwich?
Hot dog. It's got a bun. Counts.
You and I are Jewish. A hot dog? Aren't there like these amazing...
Kosher, all beef hot dog.
No, I know, but I want...
I mean, pastrami is good. Pastrami is good.
Go,
okay, on rye, mustard, the whole deal. Okay.
Okay, here we go.
Yeah.
All right. Favorite musician or band?
I love the Killers.
Look at you. Since you love space, do you have a favorite planet?
Jupiter is beautiful.
Your favorite book?
Harry Potter. All of them.
Yeah, of course. Your favorite movie?
Harry Potter. Well, though, Defending Your Life is like a really amazing movie. Albert Brooks and Meryl Streep from back in the day. I love that. I watch it once a year. I was talked about it on a podcast not that long ago, but also Harry Potter.
And your favorite color?
I love black. I like dark. Yeah.
I love it. And as we wrap, Erin, what would you like with all of your achievements? Mm-hmm. What would you like your legacy to be?
Captain America Winter Soldier. No, I mean, I'd like to continue doing this for as long as they'll let me. I think, you know, yeah, I'd like to not just have a couple one-hit wonders, but I'd like to have a sustainable long-term career. Yeah.
Erin, thank you so much.
Yeah.
This has just been absolute joy. I appreciate you. And thanks for joining me.
Thank you for having me. I appreciate it.
Conversations with Bryan Grant.